Thanks for tuning into the channel today. Just thought I'd do a quick little run up on the running into this bike. So I've now clocked 375 kilometres on it. So the last time I reported on this was when I did the 200 kilometre oil change. Now I will say, since I've whipped up to 375, you might notice now that I've pulled that solo seat off the bike. I'll give you a couple of reasons there why. In case you ever put one of those seats on, this normal seat on this stock bike comes in at roughly 32 inches ground clearance. When you put the solo seat on, it jumps up to 34 inches. Well, that's no big deal, because over there on the Suzuki that's 37, so that's a fair steep climb up onto that. But what I found when I put the solo seat on was, for one, apart from you jump to 34, it was pretty firm to ride on. In fact, there was no padding on it whatsoever. So I put something like about 200 kilometres on that solo seat and found it was very firm, sort of hard on the carcass when you were riding along. It also sloped a little bit downward and towards the tank, so that was a bit of a problem. Now the other thing, it added a slightly more vibration to the bike, because I think once you take away this stock seat, which is secured there, 4 mounting points on the bike itself, it added a little bit more vibration to the bike, because it sort of takes away the secureness of the stock seat mounting and holding the bike together. So looking at those, but apart from the looks of the solo seat, it certainly looked the part on the bike. But at this stage I'm not going to give up on it. What I'm trying to think of now is some way I can pad it up a bit better and maybe put a gel seat on it, or gel padding underneath the solo seat, because there's just nothing there. You're just sitting on a bit of vinyl cover and overlapped by springs. So if you look at it that way, it's all right to look at, but after you put a few kilometres on it, and I did do a few good runs, I found it sort of a bit challenging on the rear end. Okay, so we got that out of the way. Now the next thing, I've been riding this bike around town, mainly around that 50-60 kilometres now. Occasionally I might hit 70 kilometres now if I'm out on that loop, when I do a 6 kilometre loop around this expressway, or where I meet the Eastern distributor. What I can say with these Euro 4 bikes, they run a bit leaner than normal, and therefore they got the habit on deceleration, or from start off they surge a bit. Now to combat this side of it, and it's slightly annoying when you're riding these sort of bikes, and they differ from bike to bike, but what I'm going to do with this one is I've pre-ordered what they call a booster plug from overseas. It should be here early next week, and I'm going to run this bike now once it arrives with the booster plug in it and see how much difference that makes. I'd expect it'll make a fair bit of difference to the overall running of the bike, and it'll be a lot more comfortable and more enjoyable bike to ride without that shunting like a train, like being on a train track and being shunted along on a train at times. So it's like that, a really snatchy throttle at times, but I think it can be avoided by just fitting a booster plug to them, and it'll get rid of that leanness of that part of the cycle of riding the bike. Yeah, so if you're wondering what else has been done to the bike in the first 375 k's, I've tightened the mirrors, these handlebar bolts, these top ones and the ones underneath. I've tightened those earlier on today. If you look at these two bolts here, the front part of the engine frame, this one, tighten those two. If you look here on the side here, this bolt here, left foot peg, tighten that one. And those ones alone brought in a little bit of extra vibration. Like you could say, well, what do you plan on doing about it? Well, if you've got one of these Enfields, you just make it a habit. This will be your very best friend. It's called Loctite 243. It's a medium strength blue, and this is what you'll put on the bike when you get it up into a few kilometres. I'm not going to put it on yet, but I will put it on by the time it's probably done 1,000 k's, and when I do a final tighten, I'll Loctite all these bolts. Very rarely have trouble with this one or these, but it's a good idea when the time comes to go over and blue Loctite the lot. Now I was getting really nice positive gear changes to this when I first got on the bike for the first, say, 100 kilometres. By the time I got around about 250, that had changed, and it was sort of a little bit hit and miss with the gears. So I did a slight adjustment to the clutch here, and now I'm back to positive gear changes on it, and the clutch is working fine and all of that. But so this is a bike, or if you buy one of these classic 500s or V5s or something, they're a bike you've got to have a look at it. If you're not prepared to do any work on them yourself, well, my advice would be pick another bike, because they are a bike where you've got to get a bit of hands-on and dirty work. If you look at the chain on these bikes, I wouldn't class them as really good quality chains that come with them. It's got a fair bit of slack on it for the amount of kilometres it's travelled. Just about close to an adjustment, I'd say. Sometimes it's well greased, so you can see the grease coming off it. So, if you keep them well greased, they'll last a while. If you don't keep them greased or that, you might strike a problem. When you do your oil change yourself, there's always that risk you'll get an oil leak afterwards. Well, if we look here, underneath the bike, you've got the area there where the filter basket is with 2 little screws. After I did all my tightening up, I did go for a ride and everything appeared to be alright. Went out and did another longer ride around town, around about 30-40 kilometres in 2 runs, come back and then noticed that one with the 2 bolts where the basket sits underneath. It's usually the problem one and the hardest one to stop any leaks if you get them. So it was leaking, so I give it another little nip up again, and now it's stopped and everything's right in that area, so everything's nice and sealed under there. But if I would have got in the first state and give it a bit of a heavy-handed hit, well, there's always that risk of snapping the bolts. Okay guys, while I'm at it, I might just mention to you now, if you check the oil level on the sight glass here, it's nice and full. But if I swing it to this point here, where the slope of the ground, or the slope of the slab here goes down a little bit, I could bring the bike back here after a run. It'll show no oil at all. I swing it over to this part of the brander here, it'll throw a different reading there. So your best bet is, with these particular bikes, is either put in the amount what you actually take off the bike from new, or just go back to your book there and then put in close to that litres, and make it a habit of going back to the same spot each time when you do your oil and filter changes, and do your reading there, and then you'll get a lot better idea how much it takes rather than overfill the bike with oil. So guys, here's a perfect example why you can't really trust this sight glass on these oil windows. I've been out on roughly a 20-minute ride. So prior to going out, I had the bike parked over there. So when it was over there, it was showing virtually over the window, so almost in the over full position of the sight glass. But I just went out, did around about 20-minute ride, come back, decided to park it over here. So you can see how it sits now. It's down low. If I take the bike then and come out another ride and bring it back to that spot roughly there, you won't see any oil in the window, and you'd be having 3 different readings and just wondering where your oil level really is. So that's why I say go back to the same spot where you actually put your oil in, check your oil level readings from there, and you'll be spot on. So with these bikes, the oil level window, like you're looking there, sometimes there's oil in it, sometimes there's not. Don't be too concerned. Just work out when you put your oil in there, when you did your oil change, how many miles you went, and sort of work it out that way rather than just guess by looking in that window. I put some petrol in it yesterday, and it ran 10 litres of gas to 315 kilometres, so which worked out at around, say, 2.1 gallons, and I think that worked out at around, if you go back to miles per gallon, people like to hear it in miles per gallon in most places. So it works, I'd say it's pulling around 85 miles to the gallon, and working on those miles per gallon, that's 4.5 litres to a gallon in the old scale. Not sure what it'd be in the US ones, but in our scale that's 4.5 litres to a gallon, and so 85 to the gallon, and it's running really well and sort of to spec that way. So apart from that, this bike's running all right, and I'm fairly happy and how things are running in that area, and I'll just keep running, and I'm only around 125 k's off now before I can hit the pace and move it up to around 80-90 kilometres an hour. So once I knock that over, I can see what it's like travelling at that speed. So I think now I'll just sign off on this one, and I'll get back to you at 500 k's and we'll see what's going by then. By that time, bike should be ready for its next oil change, and I can do a quick oil change, see what rubbish is in the oil that time. I think next time around it'll be a lot cleaner than what it was in the first hit at 200, and I'll be able to sort of do a comparison that way, and we'll sort of keep this bike moving along, see how it goes, and then hopefully be able to get out and do some longer runs out along the road and just see how it handles out there. One other thing I'll point out, brakes in the beginning were a little bit dead or spongy. Now they've got a little bit more bite compared to what they were, especially the front disc. So overall the bike's sort of starting to bed in alright, and overall it's a nice little bike to ride, and I think the more you get on them, the more fun you have. So I hope you, this heel and toe thing, it was a good thing. So if you're into one of those, like I said, I'm finding that really good to use, and if you're interested in buying one of those and put on one of these, I think you'll enjoy the experience a lot. So apart from that, thanks for tuning in, taking a look, and I will catch you on the next clip.